Hi there, I'm Lucas, I'm a violin maker in Cremona, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about some of the tools that I use in my workshop and that are necessary to make an instrument. I'm quite sure that I will forget about some of them because we really use a lot of tools, but I will try to list them all, to keep them in order, and I will put some links down below in the description, a list to some of them in case you're interested in buying them. The first tools I'm going to talk about are the block plates. I have a number 6, 9.5, and I guess you can consider this one a block plate as well, which I only use when I'm making the neck joint actually. These other two, I use them to make the joints and to put surfaces into a plane, to make them flat. Basically, for the plates, the parts that then are going to be glued to the ribs. These two are made by a brand that is called Linisen, while this one is a Veritas. Both Linisen and Veritas are really good brands. They are a bit expensive, but in my opinion they are really worth it. The quality of their planes is really good. Not only the blades, but if not what's most important, the fact that the surfaces are always really flat, which then makes it much easier to work with. I don't think a workshop without clamps is really a workshop. So as you can see, I have a wide range of them, not only in variety if not in quantity. Nevertheless, I don't really think that all of them are exactly necessary. Some of them are mainly to make the job easier. These ones are the clamps that I use for the joints. Some people would say that they're a bit excessive, and in fact they are, but I find them extremely comfortable. Nevertheless, you can get to the same result with smaller clamps. I also have quite a range of regular clamps and C-clamps, which are always useful in a workshop. Now these two clamps fit in the category of clamps that are not really necessary. This one is a clamp that I use only to glue the neck joint. This one instead is a quick grip, which I mainly use if I want to keep something into position before putting the other clamps. Now these four clamps are a bit more specific. The first one is a clamp that I use to close a sound box. I made this one myself, but it's also possible to buy it. This one is a clamp that is used to glue the linings to the ribs. Now we have the base bar clamp, or it can also be used for restoration, and this one is also a restoration clamp. I use electronic bending iron so I can regulate the temperature if I want to bend ribs or the linings or for the purfling, and I have the bending strap. Here I have some Japanese saws, which I use mainly for the scroll. This one instead is a fret saw, which I would use mainly to cut the F-holes, or else if I want to make a new mold, I would use it to cut the outline of the image of the instrument I want to copy. Gouges and chisels are probably some of the tools I represent us the most. Apart from a couple of Japanese gouges and chisels, I work with mainly two brands. Those are File, or some people know them as Swiss made, or else Dastra. Differences between File and Dastra has been discussed for a really long time, and which one is better just really depends on the person who's using them. Usually it's said that the File are easier to sharpen, but then the sharpening doesn't really last long. Instead, with the Dastra, the steel is harder, so they are much harder to sharpen, but then they last longer. Chisels have many different uses. Some of them can be to rough out some things, but I want to talk about this one mainly, which is 20 millimeters wide and is the one I use for the neck joint. If I want to make the cello neck joint, I would use a longer and wider one. Gouges instead can be used to rough out, carve out, or else for the scroll. For the scroll, I like using the line of the 7, which is an indicator of the curve of the gouge. I know some people like using the line of the 6 instead, To rough out, I really like using the 520 or else the 618, 614. These knives are only a part of what it is my, let's call it, collection of knives. Each one of them I use for a very different thing. For example, this one, which is an alpha, I like using this one for the purfling and for the F-holes. This one is the same brand, but as the blade is longer, then it's more flexible, and I like using this one for the corners of the purfling. These two Japanese knives over here, I use them for the bridge. I like to use these two knives instead, which are the exact same brand as the other ones, to make the fluting on the scroll. This is a knife I use the most for the edges, and this is a file one, same brand as the gouges. This is a knife I really like using for the shape of the neck. Then this knife instead is one that I like to use if I have to rough out some things or if I have to cut something, and I have plenty of this as well, bigger and smaller. The exact same thing I said for the clamps applies for the knives. It's not really necessary to have all these knives, but it just makes things a tiny bit easier to have more. For the purfling, which is actually what I'm doing just now, I use a purfling channel cutter and a purfling channel cleaner. This one I made myself, but it's also possible to buy something like this. Then for the corners I use this lens to check if both stripes match perfectly. Rasps and files are some of the other tools I really have a lot of, and the uses for them are infinite. Some people use them for the edges, for the F-holes, for the blocks, for the neck, for the scroll, for the saddle. So they are again one of those tools that are quite fundamental to have in a workshop. There are tools that can be quite expensive and the price range is quite big, but the quality makes a difference, and I think it's worth it. To measure is to compare a certain magnitude with another one or with a unit of reference. So not all of these tools are going to show me an exact number. If not, they're going to show me the difference, that is, to compare what I have at a certain point and another one. For example, that's the case of the square, which I'm going to use for the scroll mainly, or else when I'm making the joint, or else with the sliding bevel, which is as well something that I'm going to use mainly for the scroll or for the fingerboard. Even though it might sound a bit silly, another really important tool is a ruler. I use this brand of Japanese rulers not only because the measurement is very precise, if not because the surface is perfect. This means that I can use it to check if something is truly flat. One of the most important measuring tools is the spessimeter to check the thickness of the top or back. Now I also have here, for example, the caliper, a plastic one, because if I want to check a measurement on an instrument that it's already varnished, I don't want to ruin the varnish. And I also have here the compass. Even though these are not exactly measuring tools, masking tape, a good pencil, a good rubber are very important in a workshop. Also something good to mark, and this marking gauge. The marking gauge is very useful to make the scroll and to get the right height I will want for the borders. Finger plates also come in very different sizes and shapes, and they have all very different uses. For example, the curved ones are mainly used for the arching, while something like a flat finger plate can be used for the bass bar. We also have this one, which we always call it the Kunz, which is actually a brand. I'm sure it has another name, but I don't really know the name of this actual plane. This one is really great for things like roughing out. While it's usually better to shape the scrapers yourself according to the shape you like, it's very important to get a very good material. Violin making is a profession that requires a lot of precision, and that is something impossible to get with tools that don't cut properly. That means that it's very important to get very good sharpening tools. The first example of it is the Tormek. This machine is made in Sweden, it's quite expensive, but it's very good. And as you can see, the stone is quite big, which means that it's probably going to last me forever. It's very important to complement that with good sharpening stones. And I also have a varnisher for my scrapers. Some of the most important tools for setup include a peg shaper, a peg rimmer, soundpost setter, and the mirror. I also have the spatula, which is not really for the setup if not too close to the soundbox. Some other very important tools for the setup are a chin rest key and a ruler to measure the soundpost position, peg paste, bridge leg opener for the cello, and parchments. I also have a string lifter, which can make things easier, an end button extractor, this can be very useful, a bridge holder, and a peg holder. It's quite impossible to name all the varnishing things, but some of the most important are obviously the brushes. These are extremely expensive brushes, but the difference is huge, and if you take good care of them, they should last forever, or at least almost forever. Now these are some things for the varnish, as could be mastics, different type of shellac, benzoate, and there are also things that can be useful to color the varnish, such as turmeric, madder, or sandalwood. Some of the other things I use are rectified turpentine, beakers are very important, straw oil, alcohol, and Stan linseed oil. That's it for today, and as I said before, I'm quite sure I forgot to mention some things, such as glue for example, so feel free to mention down below in the comment section all the other things I forgot about. And if you want to see more violin making content, make sure to follow me on Instagram at FabroViolins. That's all, and have a nice day.